A new Liaison poll released this morning shows Olivia Chow's support holding steady at 31% with just days to go to Toronto's election day. Anna Bailão is in second at 17%, with Mark Saunders trailing just behind in third at 16%. Joining me now with more insight on these numbers is Liaison Strategies' David Valentin. David, good to have you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So the latest numbers are in, as we just read. Any surprises there? I mean, Olivia Chow is still holding pretty steady there.
Well, I think we saw a big bump for Anna Bailão from John Tory's endorsement, which happened in the last few days. It wasn't surprising that the bump happened, but it is surprising that Mr. Tory decided to endorse so late. I think things might be a little different if he had endorsed a little bit earlier. Not a lot of time left for Anna Bailão to make up these 14-point deficit she has to Olivia Chow, but there's still 2 days left and still a lot of campaign to go.
So you do think that Anna Bailão's jump is because of the John Tory endorsement? Like, that actually does hold weight when someone with a real name, endorses somebody?
I think it's probably correlated. And the other thing as well is we've heard, from social media, from other people as well, that they've used Mr. Tory's recording. They've been broadcasting it all over the city directly to people's phone numbers. So it's not just that it happened, but also that they communicated it to people.
We know also that Doug Ford has endorsed Mark Saunders. We haven't seen Mark Saunders move much, but that's because the poll that was released doesn't reflect the numbers after Doug Ford made that endorsement.
That's right. This poll was conducted Thursday and Friday. We've heard Mr. Ford's robocalls began Friday night. Maybe a little bit of it would be contained in this sample, but not a lot. So there may still be some late-breaking movement for Mr. Saunders as well to come.
Let's talk about Olivia Chow, because she's held quite a distant lead. Everyone's pretty far behind her in the polls this entire time. That still, people are starting to catch up, but it still hasn't really changed. Do you think in the next 2-3 days we could see some more movement there? We
could, and as the other candidates get closer to Olivia Chow, we may also see other candidate support begin to bleed to her too. There's a whole variety of possibilities here as we head into Election Day. Of course, the big question is how many people are going to vote. We saw an increase in the advance poll turnout. We saw a lot of people in downtown Toronto voting. Not so many people in North York when it came to the advance polls. So which part of the city actually decides to show up is going to make a big difference too. It's interesting because you and I were talking just off camera before about, what some candidates could have done to maybe boost their numbers. And you're saying if Mitzi Hunter had, established herself as a Liberal candidate and made her signs even just red, that might have helped her. It probably would have helped her a bit. I think voters are looking for, cheats to figure out who's doing what, who's proposing what. And, one of the things we're used to provincially and federally is political parties, and they help us organize our thoughts. We sort of know what each candidate wants to do because there's a platform. So even if we don't know our specific candidate, we know what the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition is proposing, and we have some thoughts and feelings about them. Because that doesn't exist municipally, it can be a little harder to break out and a little harder to explain to voters what it is you want to do, and also a little harder for them to trust you. Interesting. Any other trends that you've been seeing? I mean, you mentioned that a lot of people don't seem to know who they want to vote for because they haven't really looked into them or read platforms. I mean, we still have 9% of voters that are undecided, and the election's on Monday. So some people are going to hold on for dear life right until they get into the ballot box to decide who they're voting for. And this time around, they've got 102 options, 102 different candidates on the ballot. So we'll see what they decide on Election Day, but still 9% of people haven't made up their minds, so there's still room for movement in all directions. Very interesting. We'll have to see what happens. David, good to have you in. Thanks for joining us so early in the morning. Thank you for having me.